All right, this week on the Captain Bob Flight Sim podcast, we have a guest, Ben from SimYourPlane. So Ben, how did you start SimYourPlane?
So SimYourPlane started 6, 7 years ago when I was working with some of the Red Bull Air Race teams. I was sitting down one night watching Formula One racing, and I was watching before the race, the Formula One teams were sitting in their car at the race, and what they were doing is they were sitting in the car, moving the steering wheel around, moving the pedals around, moving the shifters around, and while they were doing that, it had a TV screen in front of them. And so they were racing a car racing simulator while they were sitting in the pits. And then as soon as it was 5 minutes to grid start, the TV screen would move away, the car would come off the jacks, and the driver wouldn't get out of the car. He would just drive that car out onto the race grid. And I thought, wow, that's a really cool idea. They're basically making the Formula One car into a really big simulator. We should do that with an airplane. And so I reached out to Christian Bolton, which was the pilot I was working for at the time. And I said, hey, I've got this really crazy idea. You want to try it? And he says, yeah, sure, let's do it. And the rest is history. That was, like I said, 6, 7 years ago now. So we've been doing it for a while now.
That's really awesome. I've never heard that story, so it's really cool to hear that. What is, or I guess, how do you just kind of explain SimYourPlane? What is it for the people in the audience?
Yeah, so what SimYourPlane is, it's a sensor package that attaches to a real aircraft. That aircraft can be a flying aircraft or it can be a decommissioned aircraft. So think of a real airplane in a museum. So it's a real airplane, but it's never going to fly again. It's a sensors that attach in various locations throughout the aircraft. Now, it doesn't really matter where they attach, but what they do is they pick up the control stick movements. So on an airplane, if you can imagine, they pick up the elevator, they pick up the ailerons, they pick up the rudders. So the sensors are 5 sensors. So I tell everyone it's pitch, roll, yaw, throttle. And then the fifth one is kind of a spare. You can kind of attach it to whatever. And so the SimYourPlane kit and what SimYourPlane is it's an ability to turn any existing aircraft, whether it's a real flying aircraft or a museum piece, into a really, really big joystick, essentially. So you can go on Amazon, you can go on Sporties, you can go anywhere, and you can buy these really nice HOTAS systems from Thrustmaster, or Honeycomb. You can buy a lot of these really nice stuff. And essentially, what the SimYourPlane kit does is it turns your airplane into one of those Honeycomb yokes, or it turns your airplane into one of those Thrustmaster joysticks.
Definitely. That's a really cool concept. I like how it's kind of cutting edge. I guess it's cool to think about how you can go into your hangar and do that. So really, SimYourPlane, I expect it took a while to create. How long have you been working on SimYourPlane?
So, like I said, we started the project 6, 7 years ago, and it's been a constant evolution ever since. So the very first installation was actually done overseas. So it was done in Cannes, France, for one of the races there. And unfortunately, I don't speak French. I had a little translator book, and I had my Translate app. And so you're at a race airport, and what you have to do is you have to plan a lot beforehand and go, I'm going to install this on an airplane, and I hope I bring everything with. And so I was there in, Cannes, France, installing the kit. And when I installed it, it was very much a solder this wire, run this wire, okay, crimp this wire. Okay, where does that go? Shoot, it's not long enough. Okay, and it was a lot of just trying to figure out a lot of PCB board soldering, and then struggling through Arduino programming and Raspberry Pi, and it wasn't a really plug and play. Fast forward over these last few years, what I've done now is it's essentially just a USB connection, or it's a Bluetooth connection. So there's no more stripping wires and programming a little board and figuring out where it goes and pinning it out and soldering. So really, I would say the evolution of the product hasn't really stopped. So from the race till now, it's been a constant evolution. Even up to these last few months where I've been working on in-house made sensors, so no longer sourcing them overseas. I've been able to make them in-house. It's just a lot easier, and I can control the design and control the cost a lot more effectively.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the questions I had later was about the in-house design, because I know you were talking about that at the Flight Sim Expo. So you say that you're trying to get everything made in the USA. Where are you kind of with that?
So right now, I have the sensors that I've differentiated into two different variants. So we have the pro grade sensor, which is the aluminum body sensors, and that's what we've been using for a number of years now. And then what I've done now recently, just to get a more cost-effective approach, is I've decided to do made in America sensors. The made in America wasn't first and foremost what I thought about doing. It was more so I wanted a more cost-effective solution. And so that cost-effective solution was a 3D printed body sensor. So that was the body, the spool, the tensioner, and then the components I tried to do made in America as well. Since I was going to be doing the 3D printing in the US, I thought, well, let's see if I can do everything else in the US. Now, some of the components on the PCB board, well, unfortunately, there's only one place in the world where you can get those little minute PCB components. But I do try and strive myself in saying, yes, it's made in the USA as much as possible. So the PCB board, I source out of New York. So the actual components where they get the individual components from, they are probably overseas, yes, but the actual manufacturing of it is tried to be as most US as possible. Even down to the zip ties in the kit. So I spend a couple bucks extra to get made in the USA zip ties, and guess what? They're in the kit. And so I really tried to say, here's a cost-effective solution, and while being a cost-effective solution, hey, guess what? It's made in America, which for me, it has a lot of pride in that, and it's something that I think as a country we should be happy in.
Definitely. So I guess what kind of makes your the SimYourPlane company unique from other companies?
So we're not just a hardware supplier. So SimYourPlane, the kit itself, is really the hardware kit. So someone can go to the website, message us through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and then basically just say, hey, I want to buy a SimYourPlane kit. Click buy, it goes to a checkout process, and then a few days later they get one in the mail. So that's really on the hardware side of things. We're no different from any other manufacturer when you talk about Logitech or Thrustmaster or Honeycomb in that regards. Where we really differentiate is the uniqueness of our hardware. So whereas a Honeycomb yoke, if you want your Honeycomb yoke to be blue or yellow, well, they don't really offer that. So we don't offer that either, but we have the ability to have a variety of different control fields because you have that sensor kit that's installed in your J3 Cub, let's say. Well, that J3 Cub is going to feel like your J3 Cub because you're using your J3 Cub control stick. Those same sensors you can take out and put in a Caravan, a Cessna Caravan, for example, and you have the control feel of a Cessna Caravan. So that's what's unique about ours. But then again, that's on the hardware side. On the software side, we do work with a lot of commercial partners where they say, we want to do this. We want to do this with simulation, and no one really is doing this in simulation. A great example of this is if you look at any of the paid aircraft you get, whether it be for Prepare or for X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Simulator or just any of the simulators out there, any of the payware software is very much tailored towards the home cockpit folks, where they have a 747 cockpit, they want to fly the latest and greatest Airbus, A380 or whatever it may be, and that's really where a lot of those paywares are. It's really kind of the mass. What we focus on from SimYourPlane as far as the software is very unique niche markets. So one of the markets, as an example for what we were doing recently, is we're working with a company here in South Carolina that does aerial saw application. Aerial saw is a really unique thing. If someone hasn't seen aerial saw, I'm going to just say, just pause the podcast or pause this video on YouTube if you're watching it, pause it, open a new tab, and just go to YouTube and type in aerial saw. It is the weirdest, most wildest thing you'll ever see in your life. Essentially, to break it down into a Reader's Digest version, you have a Hughes 500 helicopter typically, and then you have a 100-foot aluminum beam or aluminum tube that hangs below the helicopter, and attached to that 100-foot tube is a 30-foot long cage and beam that carries 10 2-foot diameter saw blades that are
Oh
approximately
yeah.
quarter-inch thick. So very wild, very random. That's not an aircraft where someone's going to go, oh, you know what? That's in the pay store. I'm going to go buy that because that's really what I want to go fly. It's a very unique niche market. So what we're doing with the company is we're developing for them the software side of things to allow the aerial saw functionality to function with an X-plane. We're doing the plug-in work to be able to manipulate the saw, the branches are cut, the rotation effects of it. So a lot of that is either done by myself or a lot of that is done through people that I work with and kind of bring into the community and say, hey, can you help us with this? And then you help me with this, and then I then pass it on to my customer so that they can have an aerial saw simulation. The aerial saw simulation is just really just one example of that commercial market where we're kind of help with that software side of things where no other company that I know of, at least that I've seen, I should say, really works with those niche customers and says, hey, you want to be into flight simulation, you want to do something with flight simulation, but it's not something that's just off the shelf right now. And that's where we step in and say, hey, look, we can help you with that.
That's awesome. I remember the aerial saw. That's so cool. What are some of the
Yep.
are there any struggles with that?
So the biggest struggle was when we started the sling load functionality written by Laminar Research and written by Austin with an X-plane did not allow for a rigid beam. So historically, sling load aircraft, sorry, I should say sling load helicopters. Sling load helicopters, it's a soft rope. Now, sometimes it's a cable, but essentially you can pull a rope, but you can't push a rope. And so the
Gotcha.
rope is soft. And so think about Bambi bucket operations or think about picking up something like an air conditioning unit to sit on top of a building. What happens is the helicopter has the load in front of the helicopter, say, 10, 20 feet in front of the helicopter. And the helicopter picks up into a hover, hovers over the object, and then picks it up vertically. And when it sets it down, that rope becomes soft. It doesn't actually have any tension.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the aerial saw, it is a rigid fixed tube from the helicopter to the saw blade. So it's 100 foot of rigid beam. X-plane Laminar Research does not have that modeled in as a solid object. It just has it in as a rope. And so some of the work that we did was reach out to Austin, and Austin and Laminar Research designed for us a special build of X-plane 11, which is now going to be rolled into X-plane 12, that has the functionality of having a solid beam connected from the helicopter to the object saw. So I would say that was the biggest thing, just to say, look, we have this rigid thing that, again, we're talking about a percentage of a percentage here.
Yeah.
If you take helicopter pilots, they're already a small percentage, and then you say, utility helicopter pilots, it's even smaller percentage, and then you say, okay, I'm a saw pilot. I don't know, you're talking to maybe 50 guys in the US, I don't know, maybe 100. You're talking to a very, very small group of people.
Yeah.
So the software side of things is just not designed for that. In addition, if I may, continue, the way the saw contacts the ground. So what happens is you have this rigid beam, but then you have to pick up, if I can see on the video here, you have to pick up in this arcing motion. And so what happens is you have this helicopter and it has to pick up the saw and it picks up in this arcing motion. And then it picks it up vertically. It's a very unique thing, whereas a Bambi bucket or, that air conditioning unit, it just stays in one position. It doesn't really flop over. You don't want, well, in soft water, it flops over. But you don't want the air conditioning unit from a helicopter sling load to flip over. You want it to stay rigid. Whereas the saw, it lays on its side and then it gets picked up into the vertical orientation. Combining that with the ability to, move and cut trees. And so everyone's all excited about, the next gen forest that's coming out by X-plane and Laminar Research. And for me, I would say I'm one of the only people that really, really need that. Before, people saw the trees like, oh, they're cool, but they didn't really have a need for better trees. For me, I have that absolute need for better trees because all we do is hover over top of trees and cut trees. So if you look at Laminar Research, it has, that little, X pattern, cross for what a tree looks like. It's not a 3D object. And so I've got 3D trees that I'm working with now, and I'm going to work with the X-Plane 12 trees here pretty soon. But the ability for a saw pilot to maneuver around those trees. So there's a
Oh,
lot of just weird things that just out of the box the softwares don't allow, that we need to work with people to help us get what we need out of it.
definitely. That is a really cool use case of like a very niche simulator
Yeah.
markets. That's incredible that you've been working on that. Uh, what do you think with um with SimUplane? What do you think VR's role is in flight simulation?
It's absolutely huge. So to spill the beans a little bit, VR is huge, and we think it's going to be the next thing for VR training. So much so that this week I'm submitting paperwork to the FAA for approval for VR as a flight training device. And so, as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Everyone I've spoken with, even at the FAA, no one's told me that someone submitted the paperwork yet. So I think we're going to be the first. We hope we're going to be the
Oh
first.
wow.
But we're submitting for approval for VR. VR for me it's the ultimate. You get full immersion. You get the ability to look around. Take a look at helicopters, for example. Helicopters, you're staring at the ground, staring at your saw, but you also need to be looking ahead, but then also looking behind you to make sure you don't touch the tail rotor.
Hmm.
You're not going to be able to build that into a scenery. Sorry, you're not going to be able to build that into a simulator in the traditional sense of monitors. And so for me, VR is huge. And then to take that a step further, augmented reality is even better than that. Because augmented reality allows us to have physical things in front of us, physical sticks, physical switches, that we can blend that physical world with the virtual world. So Vario is doing some incredible things right now with their masking technology and things like that. Even Prepare 3D, being able to build in a lot of those things built in straight to the software is incredible.
Oh wow. I never realized there were like masking technologies like that. H-
Yep.
Yeah. How do they kind of work?
So, what a masking technology is, if you can imagine, I guess the best way to describe it is you have your desk. So, your desk's in front of you, and what you do is when you're in the VR world, so you're in the VR goggles, let's say, and you're using Varios, these don't have the applications to, let's say, an Oculus Quest 1 or a customer version 1 Rift. They just don't have that technology. So we're talking directly in related to the Vario and then some of the new advances from other augmented reality headsets. So essentially what you have is you have that goggles on your head and you're sitting in front of your desk. And what you do is you tell the goggles to say, hey, the border of my desk is a masked zone. Or you can think about the opposite way and say, everything not my desk is a masked zone. And so what the computer says is, great, you've shown me what you want to have as a virtual world and what you want to have as a physical world. So if I were to pull my phone out, put my phone on my desk, or have my hands on my desk, or the cat runs across my desk, let's say, that will still be using the pass-through technology on the front lenses of augmented reality headset. The non-masked world, or again, if you want to think about it in the reverse sense, the world that is not on my desk, that world I'm saying is fair game to generate imagery on. So generate the moonscape, or generate the starscape, or generate the oil rig platform that I'm about to land on because I'm flying a helicopter, or
Mm.
generate the forest and this fire because I'm about to go do a firefighting mission. So you tell the goggles where you can render and where you can't render. Traditionally, VR goggles started with just render everywhere, use these images, use the front tracking cameras to stitch the world together to show where you are. Whereas now we can use those front lenses along with Steam VR bases, things like that, to say, don't render this, keep the head tracking ability, but just don't render this area. Because we know where this area is, we've masked that area. That technology is going to get better and better. Being able to use QR codes in places, being able to just go in software and use a hand control and say, "Hey, don't do anything here." So that technology is definitely getting there. I would say, as far as simulation wise, really the number one simulation that is doing it out of the box is with Prepare. And so they have the Vario support out of the box, and they also have that masking ability, out of the box. Is it perfect? Is it great? No, it's got some bugs, don't get me wrong. But to be able to do that kind of technology today is pretty incredible. Now, DCS does have it. I don't know fully the DCS masking ability and what level their technology is at now, but it's definitely still, again, not turnkey out of the box perfect. It works, but it's something that's going to continue to grow and going to get better and better.
Absolutely. Things like this really excite me with flight simulation. I can't wait to like try it all. It's great. Absolutely. Why did you choose the name SimYourPlane? What's kind of the story behind it?
Trying to think. I tried to come up with a good way to describe the product, and I was talking to my wife, and we just kind of came up with you're using your simulator, so you're using your airplane as a simulator, and so why not just sim your plane, because your plane is your sim. And so I thought, sim your plane. So that's kind of where it started, and I will be honest with you, it's probably been one of the best names that I've picked. Again, not to pat myself on the back here, but every time I talk to someone, I start explaining it to them, and they're like super confused. They're like, I don't get it. I just, like, what are you trying to do? And then I could explain some more, and then, like, you can see that light bulb go on. They go, oh, you use your airplane as a simulator. And I go, yeah, sim your plane. They go, oh, I get it now. I get it. And so that's kind of where the story started. And again, it's been great ever since, because once I'm able to talk to someone enough and be able to kind of explain it a little further, they kind of go, oh, okay, yes, sim your plane. You're using your airplane as a simulator. Got it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I wonder if I should get my flight school to do that. That'd be epic.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. But I've heard a little bit about your 5-axis joystick card. Kind of, what is that all about, and how does it compare to the Leo Bodnar?
Yeah, so the 5-axis button board or axis board really kind of came out of just a dev project that I was working on internally, and I saw those Leo boards overseas, and they were expensive, and there was just a lot of functionality, and where do I pin this, and I think it was, I don't know, like $50-$60, and then you add shipping, and then you get it from overseas. It just becomes expensive. And I thought, man, I need to build this for myself. And I noticed a lot of home cockpit build guys, what they are using is they're using physical controls that they find from an aircraft salvage yard somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so let's say they found a T-38, let's say, or let's say T-33, an old aircraft. And so they found a T-33, and they want to take this T-33 and make this T-33 into, a simulator. Well, they're going to have, this button board and this button board, and, I have all these button boards. You have to pin all these wires, and it's great. Those Leo boards are great. There's the FreeJoy, which is another product out there that uses the, I can't remember the board acronym, but there's the FreeJoy, which is also another board. And I noticed a lot of them have so much functionality, and for what I needed, I just needed a tiny little board just to put 5 sensors together and just plug it into the computer. And so for me, when I came up with that, it wasn't really a going after a market that was already utilized. It was just, I needed something for myself. I was going to buy the boards in bulk. I was going to buy the PCBs in bulk for other projects, and I thought, hey, might as well just offer this to people. For me, when I did it, just to give some backstory, I had to do some testing for the helicopter, so the aerial saw and things like that. And so I was like, well, my cheap little Logitech joystick at the house doesn't really work very well. I don't have one of those full HOTAS systems. I don't have the desk space for it, and to be honest with you, I don't have really kind of the need for all the buttons and switches. Most of my X-Plane work is very dev-based. I don't sit there and fly flights and do missions. I play around with something just to test something out, check scenery, up, down, check something, and that's it. And so for the helicopter, I wanted something a little bit more than just that joystick. I just have a was it Logitech Extreme. It was just the cheap $49 one from Amazon. And so what I did was I took a chair that I found in the shop, and I just took a chair and I basically built a Puma Flight Controls helicopter control kit for it. And so I've got pedals down there, I've got a yoke, I've got a cyclic, and I've got a throttle. I nicknamed it my cheapest series because I think I built the whole setup for like $100 maybe.
Oh wow.
And that's pedals, cyclic, collective, throttle, buttons. That's everything. And so I had all these axes coming from potentiometers and Hall effect sensors, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to solder it. So I soldered it to this little PCB board, and I made a bunch of jumpers, and I go, I'm just gonna design my own PCB. So I just designed my own PCB, and then just some strips of 5-pin connectors, and then it's just much cleaner. So it was really, I needed something for myself, and I thought, well, I think there's a market out there for other people to use this, and so if I can help other people get into this, the kind of this, hobby for cheap, well, might as well.
Definitely. That's cool. I was thinking that was really cool at the expo when we saw it. This is a
Good.
kind of a fun question, but what's a movie you would repeat over and over that isn't necessarily your favorite?
Movie I'd repeat over and over again. If you said TV show, I could have been first there. Movie. I don't know. I really like the Bourne series.
Oh,
I don't
gotcha.
know. There's something about the Bourne series movies I like. But if I had to say any movie, I'd say the movie On Any Sunday. It's an old movie. It's an
Really?
old documentary about motorcycles. It's like an old movie. It's got Steve McQueen in it, and it's just a fun movie. It's just a sit down and relax. I grew up riding dirt bikes, and so it's just a fun movie all around.
Definitely. That's awesome. I'll have to watch that one. I'll put it in the show notes too. So go to CaptainBobSim.com/I think 12, and that should get you there. Let me double check.
Yeah, no, it's a good old show. It's not a show where there's a plot line. It's just a story about some guys getting together and riding dirt bikes on weekends. It's just kind of the sport of it all.
Yeah, it's fun like that. You said you had a favorite TV show. Which one was that?
Ah, my wife will kill me, but I love Seinfeld. I can watch Seinfeld constantly. I have to kind of slowly introduce Seinfeld jokes to her. She goes, "Is that Seinfeld?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Stop that." So I
That's
enjoy
funny.
Seinfeld.
Awesome. Okay, it looks like 12 is the show notes link. So CaptainBobSim.com/12. It'll get you there. Awesome. Wow, already 12. That's really great. So you said you do a lot of development work, and I honestly can relate to that. I have, usually I'm building a massive flight simulator setup, but 90% of my flying is with the same Logitech joystick, and it's on a table connected to the computer, just taking off and then immediately landing. If you had to choose, which one would you prefer, building or flying your simulator?
Um, I would have to say flying. It's a lot of fun building the sim and getting it there. I've had a lot of fun recently doing some scenery work, and I've started to get into animation. Joe from VR Sim Labs, a guy that does some X-Plane stuff, he's kind of helped me do some animation. And then again, Nimbus Solution, Nimbus Simulations, both those guys have been incredible help for me. They both have incredible products on the X-Plane org store, so definitely check those out. But I've really had a lot of fun learning the animation stuff. So I've kind of surprisingly kind of shied away a little bit from the animation and some I guess some plug-in things within X-Plane. But I've been having a lot of fun learning how to do that, learning how to animate objects. I'm much more of a physical, hands-on person, so the helicopter sim is a great example with a aerial saw. So we have this big steel structure and where the sensor mounts. Okay, drill a hole here, rivet it here. When it gets to okay, what does this line of code go? Oh man, I can do that. I can do C++ and C++ and Arduino and Java, so I know those languages. It's just I struggle so much, and I take 10 times longer than everyone else to do the same thing. So that being said, I think I'd like to just fly it because I like to see my product when it's finished.
Definitely. That is a good reason to do it. But yeah, are you riveting the actual saw or aerial saw, or is that?
So basically, for the FAA approved, or sorry, the hope to be FAA approved simulator that we're doing, we've taken a Hughes 500 that actually came out of Australia, and that aircraft was in a wreck, and it was basically just ripped apart for all the components. Because even though the aircraft's crashed and it's no longer usable, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of components all within the aircraft. They're still perfectly good to use, and so we've taken that aircraft, we've taken that shell of the aircraft, and that shell of the aircraft is where we've remounted sensors, remounted switches to basically build a cockpit from. And so there's not really much riveting and building as far as the saw, in regards to the saw, but we have the actual cockpit that we've kind of rebuilt into being this base. So if you can imagine kind of like the Frascas. The Frascas have them.
Oh yeah.
Fly Elite has them. It's kind of a simulator that kind of feels like that, but instead of using cheap plastic and plywood, we're using a real aircraft. So the actual control stick, the cyclic, the collective, the throttle, that's the actual physical flight hardware. So if it wasn't in that aircraft, it would be on the shelf, tagged for replacement in an aircraft that needed it, or it would be inner aircraft being used. So the actual stick has that click button feel. Everything has that real tactile feel to it.
Definitely. Yeah, you can really get that tactile feel. I was in I think it was a Huey, and the buttons, they just feel like they're so clicky. It's satisfying.
Yeah. And it's amazing, just that button feel. There's a major difference between that button feel and even the best of Thrustmaster, best of Honeycomb, or best of Turtle Beach, or who you pick a name, doesn't matter. The best of one of those companies is still not the same feel as that tactile click. And when we're building muscle memory, we're building training, we need that tactile feel. We need that muscle memory feel of this is what it's going to feel like to click that button. I need to know what that button feels like. I need to know how much I need to press that button to release that hook, let's say.
Yeah, that is an important aspect of aviation. I was reading a post today even that was telling everyone about how they should really map out their cockpit if they fly it often, their actual plane cockpit, to a point where they can disable the autopilot circuit breaker closing their eyes, which I thought was really interesting. I'm like, why would you go that deep into it? But in an emergency, that's important to have that muscle memory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why, for me, I feel so strongly about SimYourPlane. Because what happens is, if you have a SimYourPlane set up, say in your 1Say2, you pair that with a set of augmented reality goggles, and I say that, and I'm not being futuristic when I say that. We have augmented reality goggles that you can pick up right now, plug into your computer, and you have 3 degrees of freedom head tracking. Today, you don't have to spend the $5,000+ on the Vario, and so the ability to sit in your airplane and go through those procedures and be able to know, hey, if I'm going to be in a real emergency, it's not a keyboard click; it's reaching down and turning something. And so if you take a 1Say2, so a little bit of background. So I kind of grew up flying, so I've always been around aircraft, things like that. And in addition to growing up flying, I've done a lot of grass strip flying as well. And so grass strip for me it's a non-event. Grass strip with a tail wheel is just kind of how you're supposed to fly. So it doesn't really bother me. Whereas some people, have that, oh, it's a little bit too much, it's a little scary, it's a tail wheel, it's a grass strip. I don't know what to do. And so a lot of times CFIs, what they do is they do an emergency procedure and they get 500 feet over the ground, and then guess what happens? Okay, here's full throttle. You would have made that landing. You would have made that grass strip that you planned up for, or you would have made that cornfield that you had set up for. Because what happens is they said, okay, you start at 3,000 feet and you worked your way down, you picked the fuel, you went through your flows, you went through everything. 500 feet, you would have made the landing. For me as a CFI, I say, no, you wouldn't have made that landing. Because for me as a CFI, I want to know what you're going to do from 500 feet to 0 feet, a whole lot more than what you're going to do from 3,000 feet to 5,000 feet. Because again, we're flying a 172. Do you remember to turn the fuel selector off? We're flying a 172. It's a Coke can, right? It's a Pepsi can. So as soon as you land, what's going to happen? It's going to crunch, right? Do you open that door right before you land? In a simulator, you can't practice opening that door. You can move over and mouse click it. Sitting in your airplane, using your airplane as a simulator with the SimYourPlane kit, you can go through the muscle memories of opening that door, right? You can go through the muscle memories of turning that fuel selector. Because again, master switch is off, keys off, airplane's dead. It doesn't matter if you turn switches. And so that fuel selector on the floor on the trim column, that fuel selector can sometimes be a little sticky. You know, if it's a Piper Cherokee, man, that thing is really sticky. And so getting in the muscle memory of turning that fuel selector, opening that door, you know, that last little bit right before you land, that for me is, you know, a million times more important than from 3,000 feet to 500 feet. That last few hundred feet is really a make it or break it. And so in real flying, when we're talking about a CFI flying with a student in a 172, that CFI is going to go 500 feet, you would have made it. For me, when I was a CFI, I didn't mind certain students, obviously considering, but I didn't mind if that student landed at that grass strip. Because for me, I told all my students, listen, if I'm going to fail your engine, there's a 9 out of 10 chance I'm going to fail it over a grass strip. Because I want you to actually come down and touch the wheels. We're going to do a touch and go. We're just going to keep the gas on, keep rolling. But I wanted to get them that last 500 feet. Because a lot of times that last 500 feet is a make it or break it. And so from a simulator perspective, from a cockpit perspective, that home setup, you can't practice those little things. You're going to read it on a checklist. You're going to memorize it. All too often I've had students where they know that checklist. They know the checklist really, really well. They've memorized that checklist. But they simply say it and they don't do it. They go, okay, 500 feet. Okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Okay, well, do it because, we're at 450 feet now. We're at 400 feet now. Are you going to do it? Because they don't ever get to practice that. They say they would do it, but in an actual emergency, you're stressed, you're worried. That big fan up there is stopped. It's not giving you cool air. You're starting to sweat. And so the ability to practice those as a muscle memory is just absolutely key.
Absolutely. I think I fall a little victim to that as well. I'll be like, okay, landing light off, taxi off, and I'll just like go about my day. But you actually have to click them, so that's important. Do you, as a CFI, use SimYourPlane with students, or was that before?
So I was a CFI before I started SimYourPlane. So I haven't done students in a number of years now. I've just been so focused on the engineering side of aviation and then the product side of aviation from the simulator perspective. So I've not been fortunate enough to do a CFI SimYourPlane. I've worked with a lot of pilots and kind of helped them set it up as a CFI, but not given any instruction as a student perspective.
Oh, gotcha. That's awesome. Let's see. I do have a few more questions. One of them is, what advice do you have for people building their flight simulators?
I would say don't go overboard. You can start with that Logitech Extreme Pro 3D, I think they call it, from Amazon, right? You can start with that little cheap little Logitech and just get started. I've had a few customers where they got started and what they did is they immediately went to download ortho photos, they immediately went to download this Better Skies, they immediately went to download this payware and that payware, and then they call me like a day or two later and they go, I can't figure it out, my computer keeps crashing, it doesn't work. And it's like, just start basic. Start with the built-in airplane, get yourself familiar, get yourself some shortcut keys, map your joystick, just start basic and add as you need. There's all too many people out there that just go full bore into it and then they get frustrated by it and then they get upset because it doesn't work, and it's just slow down. So my recommendation is start slow, and then honestly, I would really look at the freeware community, and then just some of the forums. There's a lot of people out there that are just amazing people to help. That can really just kind of help build things from the ground up. So you say you're flying some weird random airplane. Again, applies to X-Plane, not so much the other software, but you have some weird random airplane that you want to have simulated. Well, find a community. Get started that way. And I would honestly recommend everyone be a giver more than a taker. Don't just be someone that just downloads and just buys aircraft but doesn't kind of contribute back anything. Contribute back to the users, contribute back to the developers and say, hey, here's a little bug, here's a little of this, I've got someone that can help you with this, that kind of thing. So start basic, and then continue it being a group, community.
Definitely. I like that. A lot of times people are like, just go full send, even. But sometimes it's a lot more stable and sustainable to kind of ease yourself into it. Start small and kind of work where you are. Yeah. What? I was going to say something else. People often do that too, where they're like, I don't have all of this, I can't start. And that's another barrier that I think you don't really need to have that like $10,000 helicopter simulator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, so when I did my my DIY Puma helicopter control setup, like I went and basically set that up the absolute cheapest way I could do it. And so I found this little joystick thingy from Amazon for like $18, or sorry, eBay for $20 or something like that. And then I soldered it together. I went to Home Depot and found some PVC pipes, and I, siliconed this together. And then for the throttle on the Collective, the throttle is from a motorcycle, electric motorcycle throttle. And so everything was just super DIY. Again, I didn't spend a fortune on it. And so you can really get into the hobby cheap, and you can get into it cheap if you're willing to put some effort in. And then in addition, if you say, well, I don't want to, pay, I don't know, was it $60 for the simulator? It's not that much, just pay it. But if you don't want to do that, great, go get Flight Gear. Flight Gear is a complete open source simulator. You don't have to pay a penny for it, and you can just be a user, right? And so you can get into the sport, but you can get into the hobby really cheap. And you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you don't have to have that to get started.
Definitely. I like that advice. All right. What is your favorite part of the flight simulator community?
Favorite part? I would say some of the content that comes out of it. I was amazed, obviously, from the manufacturers of the software themselves. So like X-Plane, Laminar, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin with Prepare. I was amazed at some of the content they're putting out, but also some of the third-party content. So VK Skylabs, it always impressed me. Like, they're just incredible, content that they produce. They helped us with a custom Long Easy for one of our sponsored airshow pilots. But they recently came out with this DC-3 on floats, and it's so cool. Like, I don't know, for me, the content that is not just another Boeing or another Airbus, I think that content is just really cool. So for me, the flight sim community, that's really where I like. It's just, opening up, the news one day and seeing someone's released this aircraft, and it's just, whoa, like I never would have expected that airplane. And it's not an airplane that you see every day. For me, a 172 in the simulator is great because people can get into the hobby. They can learn how to fly. It can help them with their real flying skills, and it's great. But I like to fly things that I know I'll never be able to fly.
Definitely.
I like to open it up and go, I'm going to do an airdrop from an X-15. I'm going to go Mach 10 or whatever some crazy number is. I want to do that because I'm never going to be able to experience that in real life. I want to go fly an F-35. And so for me, that content is cool. I don't care so much for the Airbus or the 737 because I can go on a Southwest flight later this week and I'll be on a 737. Like, that's cool, but like it doesn't it doesn't have that cool wow factor as far
Yeah.
as content. And if we're talking about just pure simulation, in my opinion, the idea behind simulation is being able to experience something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to experience. Now, people can argue, say, well, you know, how can you fly a 737? Well, okay, yeah, you're going to be sitting in the back, but still, like, you're sitting on the plane. Like, let's go simulate something. Let's go simulate an aerial saw. You know,
Mhm.
I keep twisting their wrist to let me go take a 500 up for an aerial saw flight, but it's probably not gonna happen. But I can sit in the simulator and go fly an aerial saw around, and that's something that I'll never be able to experience in real life. So, and simulation's a great boy for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like the community. They're they're great people. Uh, Keeping you community. You're great. Yeah, I think that about sums it up. Yeah, I don't have any more questions for you. So yeah, I always like to open it. Do you have any questions for me?
No, no, I appreciate you taking the time. Definitely, thanks for stopping by, chatting with us at FS Expo. Definitely some fun stuff. I appreciate what you're doing. I need to do better about being a content creator. I'll put it this way, so I'll pat you on your back and say kudos to you. I'm a bad content creator. I come home from an event or I come home from a show. Like I came home from FS Expo. I have two pictures from the entire show. It's the two pictures that I took when I walked into the booth to like take a picture of where I'm setting up, and that's it. It's like, oh god, I need so. No, so I appreciate you taking the time. It's people like you that kind of grows the content, so people like me can be lazy and forget to take a photo and look at photos after event like, oh wow, yeah, I was there, like, yeah, that was a really cool booth, like, so no, I appreciate the content creators of the community.
For sure. Well, if it makes you feel better, most of the pictures were actually my dad's. I don't know how many I took.
No, it's all good. Like, and for me, I love to talk to people and communicate with people and just
Mhm.
get to know them and talk to them about the ideas and the products. And so I for me, it's more of the 10 people I talked to versus the one picture that I took.
Yeah.
I as a real small silly example, like I was at the Tennessee Department of Transportation doing an installation of the sim kit, and we did an installation in their Cessna Caravan, which is a really cool project to install it in. And I came home, and my wife's like, "Oh, do you have pictures?" I'm like, "Oh, oh, I don't." She's like, "You were installing this at Tennessee Department of Transportation. Like, you gotta have pictures." Like, I know, I didn't have any pictures. And so I kick myself for those moments when I come home and I go, I didn't take a single photo. So it's all good though.
Yeah. It's good. That's really funny. Oh yeah, thank you for taking out time of your day to do this.
Yeah, no problem at all. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. You can add all my contact info for me if anyone wants to reach out to me. I'm more than glad to help out whoever I can.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, just send that to me and I can put it in the show notes, which are, again, CaptainBobSim.com/12. So that's the short link that'll get you right over to the show notes. And, oh, one more thing. Let's try a virtual high five. So I guess
Yes.
it's right here.
Oh, it's right here.
Let's see. Oh, I think we go to the side.
Oh, it's fine.
Ready?
Okay.
Yes! We
Yeah.
got it. Fantastic. I forgot to do that in one of my last ones, so sorry about that. There we go. We kept the tradition alive.
Well, I appreciate it again. Thanks so much for the time. And yeah, if anyone needs me or if you need me for anything, I'm more glad to help out.
Absolutely. All right. Bye.